Welcome to Old Calm Historian, your serene sanctuary where the stories of the past gently unfold. Listen closely. The soft crackle of a warm fire blends perfectly with the calm background, creating a space that soothes your mind and eases your soul. With a gentle and comforting voice guiding you, let yourself drift through time, discovering forgotten tales and timeless memories in perfect tranquility. If this peaceful journey resonates with you, please subscribe and join our community of calm explorers. Now, take a deep breath, relax, and let the gentle fire and soothing stories carry you into the past. In the stillness of the ancient world, long before the hum of machines and the sterile gleam of hospitals, human life was a fragile thing balanced delicately between survival and extinction. Illness came like a shadow, creeping silently across huts, villages, and kingdoms, and the only shield against it was knowledge. Imperfect, mysterious, and often born from desperation rather than understanding. Yet within that crude knowledge, within the fumbling hands of primitive healers and the whispered rituals of early medicine, there existed a strange, enduring wisdom, one that, against all odds, saved lives. Imagine a settlement on the edge of a vast forest. The air is heavy with the smell of damp earth and firewood smoke. A child coughs through the night, the sound echoing softly through the reed walls of a hut. Outside, the healer sits beside a small clay pot, watching herbs bubble and hiss in the heat. He doesn't know the word antiseptic, nor could he name the plant's chemical compounds, but he has seen it work, time and again. The leaves, crushed and steeped, have soothed fevers, calmed pain, and drawn poison from festering wounds. He believes the spirit of the forest lives within them, and perhaps, in some way, he is right. Long before the modern microscope revealed the invisible wars of microbes and cells, humans sensed patterns. They noticed that certain barks cooled the body when the skin burned with fever, that the clay from certain rivers eased pain when spread upon an infected wound. That honey, thick and golden, kept food from spoiling and flesh from rotting. These were not coincidences. They were the earliest steps in humanity's endless dance with nature. Archaeological evidence tells us that even Neanderthals used plants for healing. In the caves of Shanidar in Iraq, remains dating back over 60,000 years have been found with traces of yarrow and ephedra, plants known for their medicinal properties. Whether these were placed deliberately by their kin or by chance, no one can say with certainty. But the hint of purpose is there, like a faint heartbeat through the stone. The idea that even our ancient cousins sought relief from pain, that they too experimented with nature's gifts, connects us across time in a deeply human way. Now imagine another scene. A woman in ancient Sumer, thousands of years later, tending to her husband's wound. The gash on his arm is deep and angry, the flesh swollen. She reaches for a small jar filled with honey. Carefully, she spreads it over the wound. The sweetness stings, but he does not pull away. Days later, the wound begins to heal cleanly, without the smell of rot. Unknowingly, she has harnessed one of the world's oldest antibiotics. Honey, rich in hydrogen peroxide and low in moisture, kills bacteria while soothing the skin. Modern medicine would rediscover this property millennia later, naming it antibacterial. But she, without knowing the term, already knew its truth. Primitive medicine was rarely gentle. It was often brutal, messy, and drenched in superstition. Yet inside those superstitions were seeds of discovery. Consider trepanation, the practice of drilling or scraping holes into the skull. To our modern eyes, it seems horrifying. But to the people who performed it, it was salvation. When a man suffered seizures or unbearable headaches, they believed evil spirits were trapped inside his head. The healer, with stone tools and steady resolve, would bore a small opening into the skull to release them. And the remarkable part? Many of those patients survived. Their bones show signs of healing, proof that this primitive surgery sometimes worked. Why did it work? Perhaps because it relieved intracranial pressure from injuries or infections. Primitive healers, without understanding anatomy or neurology, had stumbled upon a crude form of neurosurgery. In that dimly lit hut, with no anesthesia, no antiseptic, and no understanding of germs, humanity took its first steps toward modern surgery. The night deepens. You can almost hear the fire crackling in the corner of a hut, smell the smoke curling lazily toward the roof. Outside, the wind whispers through tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and pine. Inside, a healer grinds bark, seeds, and roots between smooth stones, humming softly. He remembers the lessons of his teacher, how willow bark eases fever and pain. He does not know it contains salicin, the natural precursor to aspirin. He only knows it helps. He brews the bark into a bitter tea and hands it to the patient, who drinks slowly, grimacing at the taste. By morning, the fever has broken. This is how wisdom moved in ancient times, not through books, but through breath and memory, from one healer to the next, from mothers to daughters, from elders to apprentices. The knowledge of life-saving remedies was oral, sacred, and fragile. A drought, a war, or the death of a single healer could wipe out generations of understanding. Yet somehow, across continents and centuries, these fragments survived. In ancient Egypt, medicine reached a level of sophistication that astonishes us even now. Their healers used honey, moldy bread, and copper salts to treat infections, each of which has antimicrobial properties. They understood how to set broken bones, stitch wounds, and even perform rudimentary dentistry. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, contains over 700 remedies, some purely symbolic, others strikingly practical. They treated asthma with honey and herbs, burns with resin and fat, and stomach pain with mixtures of figs and wine. In one dimly lit chamber, a scribe might sit beside a physician, recording the day's treatments. The air smells of incense and oil. The patient, a laborer from the fields, sits nervously as the healer inspects a wound on his leg. The healer murmurs a prayer to Sekhmet, goddess of healing, before applying a paste of honey and grease. The act is half faith, half science, but it works. The wound begins to close within days. The man returns home, limping but alive. Faith, too, played its part. To the ancient world, sickness was not only a physical affliction, it was spiritual, a sign of imbalance or divine displeasure. Ritual and medicine were inseparable. The healer was part doctor, part priest, and part psychologist. Their touch, their words, and their rituals often comforted as much as their herbs healed. And in that comfort, the body sometimes found strength to recover. In China, early physicians observed patterns of energy, QI, and developed acupuncture, using thin needles to balance the body's flow. In India, the Ayurvedic tradition categorized humors and elements, prescribing diet and herbs to maintain harmony. In Greece, Hippocrates would later echo these principles in his humoral theory, believing that the body's balance of fluids determined health. While these theories were not scientifically accurate, they led people toward preventive care, hygiene, and the understanding that lifestyle could influence well-being. The human journey through disease and healing is one of trial, error, and endurance. Every mistake was a lesson written not in ink, but in blood. Every recovery was a fragile victory over chaos. Primitive medicine may have been clumsy, but it was also courageous. It represented our refusal to surrender to the unknown. Now, picture a healer in a windswept northern plain, tending to a warrior's frostbitten hand. The skin is white, lifeless. She rubs it with animal fat and wraps it in cloth, whispering prayers to the spirits of warmth. Unknowingly, the fat forms a protective barrier that traps heat and prevents further damage. The prayer, though symbolic, calms the warrior's mind and slows his breathing. Body and spirit heal together. The beauty of primitive medicine lies not in its precision, but in its humanity. It was born from observation, compassion, and a deep respect for nature. Early humans did not separate science from spirit. They saw them as one. To heal the body was to honor the earth, the ancestors, and the mysterious forces that governed life. Even now, fragments of that wisdom survive. Modern doctors still use derivatives of willow bark as painkillers, honey as wound dressing, and clay in detox treatments. What was once dismissed as superstition now finds validation in laboratories. The circle closes, and the old and new touch hands across millennia. As the night deepens, the fire burns lower. The healer sits back, exhausted. His patient sleeps, breathing softly. Outside, the stars wheel slowly overhead. eternal witnesses to the endless struggle between life and death. In the silence, one truth remains: the instinct to heal, to preserve life, is as old as humanity itself. And from that instinct, all of medicine was born. From the first crushed leaf to the first whispered prayer, from the first wound dressed with honey to the first bone set straight, every act of healing carried within it the same sacred intention: to save a life, no matter how small, no matter how fragile. And that, perhaps, is why we are still here, because someone, somewhere, long ago, refused to stop trying. The centuries rolled forward like waves upon an endless shore, and with each passing generation, the crude instincts of survival began to take form, slowly, patiently, into something resembling knowledge. The world was still wild and uncertain, yet within its scattered settlements, the art of healing grew roots deeper than anyone could have imagined. Humanity was beginning to organize its curiosity. The healer was no longer just a figure of mystery or magic. He was becoming a keeper of wisdom. Imagine the slow dawn of civilization. The rivers of the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, and the Yellow River shimmer beneath the rising sun. Along these fertile banks, people learned to plant, harvest, and store food. With stability came community, and with community came the luxury of thought. Illness was no longer just a curse, it was a problem to be solved. The first physicians were born from those who dared to ask why. In a small clay house near the temples of ancient Egypt, a healer bends over a wooden table covered in scrolls. His hands are stained with ink and the faint scent of herbs. He writes slowly, methodically, copying a recipe for a remedy that has been tested and trusted for generations. It includes honey, animal fat, and crushed barley, ingredients known to soothe burns. Outside, the chants of priests echo faintly through the corridors. Healing, here, is both science and devotion. Healers like him were part of an emerging network: temple physicians, midwives, and herbalists, each preserving fragments of a vast and growing tradition. They were meticulous record keepers. Their scrolls, now brittle with age, spoke of wounds and fevers, of spirits and blood, of prayers to gods who ruled the unseen. Though their language was mystical, their methods hinted at careful observation. In ancient Mesopotamia, the healers were called Asu and Ashipu. The Asu were practical. They prepared poultices, ointments, and herbal infusions. The Ashipu were spiritual. They recited incantations to drive out the demons of sickness. Yet, together, they formed a complete system of care, one treating the body, the other treating the soul. Their tablets recorded hundreds of treatments: antiseptic washes made from beer and cedar oil, anti-inflammatory balms from myrrh and fig. When we read those clay tablets today, we can still sense their precision. They measured ingredients, observed reactions, and even made diagnoses. Primitive medicine was becoming proto-science. Picture a scene beneath the flickering light of an oil lamp. A patient lies upon a woven mat, his skin pale with fever. The healer kneels beside him, murmuring softly while mixing crushed leaves with warm wine. The scent fills the air, sharp, earthy, alive. The liquid is poured carefully down the patient's throat. A prayer follows, not to beg, but to accompany the act. The healer believes that words strengthen medicine, that faith and herbs work best together. The man breathes deeply and closes his eyes. The fever will either break or it will not. But hope is already medicine enough. As the centuries moved, medicine began to cross borders. Trade brought spices, minerals, and ideas from one civilization to another. The Chinese learned of Indian remedies. Egyptians adopted herbs from Nubia. Greeks studied Egyptian scrolls. Knowledge became a traveler, wearing many languages but carrying the same heartbeat. In India, the ancient sages of Ayurveda organized their medical knowledge into vast texts like the Karaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita. These were not primitive guesses. They were systematic manuals that described surgeries, anatomy, and even ethical guidelines for physicians. The ancient surgeon Sushruta, often called the father of surgery, described techniques for suturing wounds, repairing broken bones, and even performing early forms of plastic surgery using skin grafts. Now imagine his workshop. The smell of oil lamps and boiled herbs fills the air. Bronze instruments gleam on a wooden table. Hooks, scalpels, probes. A young apprentice watches closely as Sushruta demonstrates a delicate incision. The patient, perhaps injured in battle, breathes heavily. Sushruta's voice is calm and precise. His hands move with steady confidence, guided not by divine intervention, but by years of observation. Outside, the river flows silently, carrying away the echoes of countless generations who lived and healed before him. At the same time, in distant China, physicians studied the balance of nature within the body. They spoke of yin and yang, of qi flowing through invisible channels called meridians. Illness, they believed, was not punishment, but imbalance. Their treatments, herbal mixtures, acupuncture, and moxibustion, sought to restore harmony. Although the language of energy and spirit seems poetic rather than scientific, their methods often worked. Acupuncture, for instance, releases endorphins and alters nerve pathways, something science would only begin to explain thousands of years later. The healer, sitting cross-legged beside a small brazier, warms a bundle of herbs until it smolders. The scent is rich, resinous, comforting. A patient sits quietly, their pulse being read not by machines but by touch. The healer closes his eyes, feeling the subtle rhythm beneath the skin. Each beat tells a story, of strength, of weakness, of life flowing too quickly or too slow. With deliberate care, he places fine needles along the body, like tuning an instrument back to harmony. Primitive medicine, though bound by faith, was also guided by pattern recognition. Humans had always been good at noticing cause and effect. They saw which plants healed and which harmed, which rituals calmed and which stirred unrest. Through endless repetition and observation, they turned experience into wisdom. This slow accumulation of trial and error became the foundation of medicine itself. Some of the most remarkable discoveries were accidents. In Greece, shepherds noticed that their flocks avoided certain bitter plants that made them ill. The same plants, in small doses, cured stomach troubles in humans. Curiosity became experimentation. Soon, the Greeks, with their love for reason and balance, began to systematize these observations. Hippocrates, who lived in the 5th century BCE, is often called the father of medicine. He rejected the idea that illness came from the gods and argued instead that it had natural causes. His teachings, preserved in the Hippocratic corpus, marked a turning point, the moment when medicine began to step away from magic and toward science. He taught that health depended on the balance of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Though this theory was flawed, it encouraged careful diagnosis and record-keeping. For the first time, medicine became about observation rather than superstition. The image of Hippocrates' students gathering under the olive trees is almost sacred. They listen as he speaks softly about diet, rest, and environment. "Let food be thy medicine," he says, not as metaphor but as practical truth. He believes that the physician's first duty is to do no harm, a phrase that still echoes through hospitals today. Elsewhere, in the Roman world, the Greeks' ideas evolved further. The physician Galen performed animal dissections, mapped the nervous system, and expanded humoral theory into a complete medical philosophy. His writings would dominate Western medicine for more than 1,000 years. Yet even Galen, with all his intellect, built upon the same foundation laid by primitive healers, the endless, compassionate desire to understand the body. Imagine a Roman infirmary near the edge of a battlefield. The smell of iron and sweat hangs thick in the air. A soldier groans as a wound on his thigh is cleaned with vinegar. A physician kneels beside him, wrapping the injury in linen strips soaked in wine. The alcohol kills bacteria he doesn't know exist. He only knows the wound will heal faster this way. Outside, the distant clang of swords fades as dusk settles. Inside, the doctor murmurs quiet reassurance. He is not praying to gods, but trusting his craft. Across continents, different civilizations built their own frameworks, but they all shared the same heartbeat of human compassion. In the Americas, long before European contact, indigenous healers used plants like willow, tobacco, and coca for healing. They sang over wounds, used smoke to cleanse, and relied on the wisdom of the earth. In Africa, medicine men and women used bark from trees like the periwinkle and cinchona. plants that would one day lead to drugs like vincristine and quinine. Even in their isolation, they found truths that science would later confirm. At night, under the flickering firelight, these healers looked up at the same stars that watched over Egypt and Greece. Their chants rose into the dark, blending with the wind, carrying gratitude and hope. They may have spoken in different tongues, but their intentions were the same: to ease pain, to save lives, to make sense of suffering. As centuries turned, medicine began to codify itself. Scrolls became books. Books became doctrines. Knowledge, once shared through song and story, now found permanence in ink. But with that permanence came pride. The mystery that once humbled healers began to fade. Medicine, though wiser, also became more rigid. And yet, even then, the echo of primitive intuition remained. For behind every sterile procedure, every surgical instrument, and every calculated prescription, there is still that ancient whisper, the healer kneeling beside the fire, crushing leaves, murmuring words of comfort. The form has changed, but the essence endures. When we trace medicine's lineage, we do not find a straight line, but a spiral, returning again and again to the same truths. The earth heals, touch heals, belief heals. Whether through herbs, prayer, or steel, the act of healing is an act of love. Tonight, as you listen, imagine that spiral stretching across time. From the cave where a Neanderthal once laid a flower beside the body of his kin, to the temple of Sushruta, to the olive groves of Hippocrates, to the smoky hut of an African shaman. Each of them, in their own way, fought against the darkness. Each of them passed the flame of healing forward. That flame still burns, in laboratories, in hospitals, in hands that hold syringes or scalpels. But its first spark was struck long ago, in the silence of a primitive world, by people who refused to accept that sickness was the end. And so the story continues, not as a straight march of progress, but as a quiet heartbeat that never stopped. For as long as there is life, there will be pain. And as long as there is pain, there will be those who seek to ease it, guided not by perfection, but by the same ancient light that has always shown the way. The world entered the long shadow of the Middle Ages, carrying within it the echoes of ancient wisdom. The great civilizations that had once flourished, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Indians, the Chinese, had built foundations of healing upon which the future could stand. Yet as empires fell and wars swept across lands, much of that knowledge was scattered, buried beneath ash and time. What survived did so not in marble halls or grand libraries, but in monasteries whispered by monks over flickering candles, and in the humble huts of herbal women who gathered their medicine from the wild. In those centuries, the healer's fire burned low but never went out. Imagine a monastery in the hills of medieval Europe. Stone walls rise cold and damp against the morning mist. Inside, a monk named Brother Thomas moves silently through the infirmary, carrying a small wooden bowl filled with crushed herbs. The air smells of rosemary, sage, and damp linen. A patient lies upon a straw mattress, his face pale, sweat glistening on his brow. Brother Thomas murmurs a prayer as he dabs the mixture onto a wound. Outside, church bells toll, a sound both solemn and comforting. In this quiet place, faith and medicine are one. The monks of these monasteries were among the few literate people of their age. They copied and preserved ancient medical texts, translating the works of Hippocrates and Galen into Latin. Though they believed that illness was a test from God, they also practiced kindness as a cure. They grew medicinal herbs in their gardens, plants like lavender for anxiety, mint for digestion, and comfrey for healing bones. Their remedies were simple but effective, drawn from centuries of accumulated wisdom. Meanwhile, far to the east, in the golden cities of the Islamic world, a great rebirth of medical knowledge was unfolding. While Europe slept beneath the weight of superstition, scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba were reading, experimenting, and advancing the art of healing in ways that would later transform the world. In a sunlit courtyard of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, the sound of scribes scratching ink onto parchment fills the air. Among them sits a man named Al-Razi, known in the West as Razis. He is surrounded by scrolls, instruments, and the faint scent of herbs. Al-Razi rejects blind superstition. He insists on observation, on testing. He records symptoms, outcomes, and treatments meticulously. When smallpox and measles ravage the land, he becomes the first to distinguish between them, saving countless lives. Not far from him, another physician, Ibn Sina, known later as Avicenna, writes the Canon of Medicine, a monumental text that will shape medical education for more than 600 years. He describes contagious diseases, explains the role of environment in health, and emphasizes hygiene. To read his words now is to see the bridge between the ancient and the modern world forming. Brick by brick, thought by thought. Imagine Avicenna in his study, the oil lamp casting golden light across pages filled with neat Arabic script. Outside, the desert wind hums softly. His hand moves steadily, recording the balance of humors, the qualities of herbs, and the delicate interplay between body and soul. He believes that knowledge is divine, that to heal is to honor creation itself. In his eyes, medicine is not merely a craft, it is philosophy made flesh. As trade routes expanded, the wisdom of the East began to seep into Europe once more. From Arab physicians came new techniques, new herbs, and the rediscovery of Greek and Roman thought. But superstition still ruled many hearts. The medieval mind saw illness as both punishment and mystery. When plague came, few understood it. In the year 1347, ships arrived in Europe carrying a darkness no prayer could dispel, the Black Death. The disease spread with terrifying speed. Villages emptied, cities fell silent, and fear became the air itself. Physicians, wrapped in heavy cloaks and beaked masks stuffed with herbs, moved like ghosts through the streets. They believed the plague traveled through poisoned air, the miasma, and so they filled their masks with lavender, mint, and cloves to purify their breath. They did not know about fleas or bacteria, but their desperate measures sometimes offered real protection. Picture one of these plague doctors walking through a narrow alley at dusk. The cobblestones glisten with rain, the air thick with the scent of decay. He carries a staff to keep distance from the dying. Inside a house, a family kneels beside a loved one, whispering prayers. The doctor opens a pouch and sprinkles crushed herbs onto the floor. He writes something on parchment, charms, prescriptions, perhaps both, and leaves without a word. Outside, crows cry from the rooftops. Amid the horror, acts of compassion persisted. Some doctors risked their lives to treat the sick, guided not by certainty, but by courage. They bled patients, applied poultices, and burned incense. Not all of it effective, but all done in hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to give strength where medicine could not. While Europe suffered, another kind of healer worked quietly in the countryside. The cunning woman, the midwife, the herbalist. She knew the language of plants, the cycles of the moon, the patterns of pain. People came to her in secret, seeking cures and comfort. She made teas from chamomile to ease fever, compresses from willow bark to numb pain, and ointments from nettle and yarrow to stop bleeding. Her remedies, passed down through generations, carried the memory of ancient medicine long forgotten by scholars. But her knowledge was feared. In an age when anything unexplained was labeled heresy, many of these healers were persecuted as witches. The same hands that once saved lives were bound and burned. In destroying them, society destroyed centuries of wisdom. Yet even through fire and fear, fragments of their knowledge survived, hidden in whispers, preserved in folk songs and kitchen gardens. Time moved forward, slow as a healing wound. The Renaissance dawned like a cautious sunrise, bringing light back to the world of learning. Curiosity, once suppressed, flourished again. Artists studied anatomy to paint truthfully. Scientists dissected bodies to understand the mechanics of life. The taboo of touching the dead began to fade, replaced by wonder. In a cold room in Padua, a young student watches as his teacher, Andreas Vesalius, carefully opens the body of a condemned man. The smell of death hangs heavy, but the student's eyes are wide with fascination. Vesalius points with a metal rod, explaining muscles, veins, and bones. His hands move like a cartographer mapping an unknown land. His book, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, will shatter centuries of blind faith in Galen and mark the beginning of modern anatomy. for the first time, the human body is seen not as sacred mystery, but as an intricate machine, beautiful, complex, and understandable. Elsewhere, a quiet revolution brews in the world of healing. Paracelsus, a fiery Swiss physician, challenges tradition. He throws away Galen's dusty tomes and declares that true medicine must come from nature, not authority. He studies minerals, metals, and chemistry, believing that every disease has its specific remedy. He experiments with mercury, sulfur, and salt, laying the groundwork for pharmacology. His methods are dangerous, his words rebellious, but they push medicine towards science. Picture Paracelsus in a small workshop, surrounded by flasks, smoke, and candlelight. He stirs a bubbling concoction with a glass rod, muttering to himself. The air smells of brimstone. To his students, he is a sorcerer. To his enemies, a madman. But he sees what others cannot, that healing lies in balance, that poison and cure are often the same, divided only by dose. This age of rediscovery did not forget its past. It transformed it. The gentle hands of monks, the bravery of plague doctors, the secret knowledge of herbal women, all of it flowed together into a river of progress. Medicine, once bound by faith, began to walk hand in hand with reason. Yet, even in this awakening, humility remained necessary. For every cure discovered, a new mystery arose. For every illness named, 1,000 still hid in the shadows. Humanity was learning to look inward, to question, to test, but it still carried with it the ancient instinct of compassion. As the centuries passed, surgery became cleaner, anatomy clearer, and remedies more precise. But the essence of healing, the whisper of comfort, the steady hands, the will to preserve life, remained unchanged. Tonight, if you close your eyes, you can almost hear them all. The monk crushing herbs by candlelight, the Arab scholar writing beneath the desert moon, the midwife stirring her potion by the hearth, the surgeon tracing a vein beneath lamplight. Their voices, separated by centuries, blend into one great hymn of healing. And as their echoes fade into the long corridors of time, one truth continues to resonate, that from the caves to the cathedrals, from superstition to science, every act of care, every attempt to heal, has been an expression of love disguised as knowledge. The journey from primitive medicine to reasoned science was not a single leap, but countless small steps, each taken by someone who refused to let pain have the final word. Their courage, their curiosity, their mistakes and triumphs, all of it built the path that leads to us. And somewhere, deep in that ancient memory that humankind still carries, the old healer still sits by the fire, grinding herbs, whispering a prayer, not to the gods, but to the fragile miracle of life itself. The dawn of the scientific age came quietly. There was no thunder, no sudden flash of enlightenment, only a growing light, steady and patient, spreading across centuries. The same hands that once clutched amulets now held instruments. The same minds that prayed for divine intervention now looked through lenses, studied patterns, and began to trust observation over faith. By the 17th century, the world was changing in ways the ancients could scarcely imagine. The telescope had shown the vastness of the heavens, and the microscope had revealed the unseen world beneath the skin. What had once been invisible was now becoming visible, and with it came both wonder and fear. In a small workshop in Delft, a lensmaker named Antony van Leeuwenhoek peers through a glass of his own making. His fingers are rough from work, his eyes red from strain. But when he looks through his tiny lens, he sees something no human has seen before, a universe teeming with life. Tiny creatures swim in a drop of water, animalcules, he calls them. He watches them move, divide, and disappear. He does not yet know what they mean, but he feels the tremor of discovery. That trembling would one day shake the world. Across Europe, curiosity becomes a fever. In smoky laboratories and quiet studies, thinkers like Robert Boyle and William Harvey are pulling apart the mysteries of nature. Harvey, after years of study and countless dissections, makes a revelation so simple and yet so profound that blood circulates through the body in a closed loop, driven by the heart. It seems obvious now, but in his time, it was revolutionary. Imagine Harvey at his desk, surrounded by anatomical drawings and the faint smell of ink. Outside, the city murmurs, but he hears only the pulse within his own wrist. He feels it as proof of motion, of life's rhythm. To understand the body as a system, not as a mystery, that was the birth of modern physiology. Still, medicine remained a perilous art. Surgery was agony. There was no anesthesia, no antiseptic. A broken bone or infected wound could end a life as swiftly as a sword. In crowded hospitals, the smell of decay was constant. Surgeons worked fast because they had to. Speed was survival. Picture a London operating theater in the early 1800s. The room is hot, packed with students. A man lies strapped to a wooden table. His eyes are wide with terror. The surgeon's knife flashes in the light, moving quickly, precisely. The crowd holds its breath. The patient screams until he can scream no more. The surgeon wipes his hands on a bloodied apron. The operation is over. In the audience, a few faint, others applaud. That was medicine before mercy found its way into steel. And yet, progress crept closer, one discovery at a time. In 1796, in a quiet English village, a country doctor named Edward Jenner noticed something curious. The milkmaids who caught cowpox, a mild disease, never seemed to suffer from the deadly smallpox. Jenner wondered if one could protect people by giving them a harmless version of the sickness. He took a leap of faith. Using material from a cowpox sore, he inoculated a young boy. The boy fell mildly ill, then recovered. Later, Jenner exposed him to smallpox, and the boy did not get sick. It was the beginning of vaccination, a word derived from vacca, Latin for cow. When news of Jenner's discovery spread, it was met with both celebration and suspicion. Some praised him as a savior. Others accused him of tampering with nature. Caricatures showed people sprouting cowheads after vaccination. But slowly, proof silenced fear. Smallpox, one of humanity's oldest killers, had met its match in the hands of a man who simply dared to observe. As the 19th century unfolded, the age of observation gave way to the age of understanding. The microscope, once a novelty, became a key to life itself. In the flickering light of laboratories, the invisible enemies of humankind began to reveal their faces. Louis Pasteur, in his laboratory in France, watched as tiny organisms clouded his flasks. He proved what many had refused to believe, that disease was not born of bad air or divine wrath, but of living microbes. Germs, not curses, caused infection. With that realization, medicine gained its first weapon grounded in science. In his white apron, Pasteur boiled his instruments, sealed his flasks, and showed the world that cleanliness could mean survival. His discoveries would inspire others, like Joseph Lister, a British surgeon who used carbolic acid to sterilize wounds. Lister's patients healed instead of dying from infection. For the first time, surgery could be both precise and safe. Imagine Lister walking through the ward after a long night. The lamps are dim, the air sharp with disinfectant. On the beds, his patients sleep peacefully. No screams, no feverish moans, just the soft rhythm of breathing. The silence itself is a miracle. The thread of progress weaves through time like a patient needle. One discovery builds upon another. Anesthesia follows antisepsis. Ether and chloroform lift the burden of pain. In 1846, in a crowded theater in Boston, a man inhales ether and drifts into unconsciousness, while a tumor is removed painlessly. The audience is silent, awestruck. When the patient wakes and whispers that he felt nothing, medicine crosses an invisible threshold, from cruelty to compassion. And yet, even as the world celebrated, the shadows remained. Diseases still ravaged the poor, and superstition still haunted the edges of progress. The 19th century was an age of miracles and misery alike. But something profound had changed. The healer was no longer guessing in the dark. The candle had become a lamp. The prayer had become a procedure. Across continents, doctors, nurses, and scientists began to share knowledge. The printing press and the telegraph spread ideas faster than disease. Laboratories replaced monasteries as temples of healing. Humanity, once at the mercy of mystery, now began to take responsibility for its own survival. Still, the heart of medicine remained the same. A trembling hand on a fevered brow, a whispered reassurance, a willingness to stay beside the suffering, these ancient gestures survived every revolution. Technology advanced, but compassion never became obsolete. By the end of the 19th century, medicine had changed forever. The microscope had revealed the hidden world of germs. Anesthesia had ended centuries of torment. Vaccines had proven that prevention could triumph over despair. And yet, the faces of healers, calm, patient, steady, remained the same as those painted on the walls of ancient caves. If you close your eyes now, you can still trace the lineage of care. From the healer who chewed willow bark beside a river to ease a wound, to the surgeon who scrubbed his hands before entering a sterile room. They are all bound by the same quiet purpose, to preserve the fragile flame of life. Science had given humanity tools, but it was empathy that gave them meaning. The story of primitive medicine was no longer about herbs and chance alone. It had become a story of curiosity and courage, of mistakes that taught and failures that led to miracles. Each generation inherited not just knowledge, but the memory of every hand that had tried to heal before. And as the 19th century drew to a close, standing on the edge of a new era, the world could finally look back and see the long, winding path that brought it here. It had begun with a spark struck in a cave, continued through prayers whispered in monasteries, endured through plagues and persecution, and now stood in the bright, sterile light of laboratories. The tools had changed, the words had changed, but the heart behind them had not. Somewhere, beyond the walls of hospitals and the hum of machines, there still lingered that ancient rhythm, the healer's breath, steady and kind, echoing through time. Because healing, in the end, has never truly belonged to science or superstition. It has always belonged to love. The 20th century dawned with a strange duality, unimaginable hope and unspeakable horror. The light of science shone brighter than ever before, yet its shadows were deep. In the flicker of laboratory flames and the hum of early, electric bulbs, humanity was learning not only how to heal the body, but how to understand the very nature of life itself. The ancient world had given medicine its soul. The Renaissance had given it its mind. Now, the modern age would give it its tools. At the turn of the century, hospitals were transforming. The cold, echoing halls that once reeked of decay had become places of precision, filled with instruments gleaming under gaslight. Nurses in crisp uniforms moved silently through wards, carrying trays of sterilized tools. Charts hung at the foot of every bed. Disease, once a mystery, now had numbers, measurements, names. In one such hospital in London, a young physician named Alexander Fleming worked tirelessly, surrounded by petri dishes and the faint smell of agar. His mind was curious, restless, untamed. He often left his experiments unattended for days, lost in thought or distracted by other tasks. One morning in 1928, he returned to his cluttered lab to find that a mold had accidentally contaminated one of his bacterial cultures. Where the mold grew, the bacteria had died. That small, unplanned accident would save more lives than any miracle in human history. Fleming leaned closer, examining the pale ring of death surrounding the blue-green mold. He realized what he was, seeing a substance that could kill bacteria without harming the human body, penicillin, the first true antibiotic. It would take more than a decade for others to refine and mass-produce it, but the seed had been planted. It is easy to forget how revolutionary that moment was. Before penicillin, infection was a death sentence. A simple cut could become a grave. Soldiers on battlefields died not from bullets, but from the invisible wounds left behind by bacteria. Penicillin changed that forever. Imagine a soldier in a field hospital during World War II. The air is heavy with smoke and dust. Nurses move between rows of wounded men, their faces pale, hands trembling with exhaustion. A doctor injects a milky liquid into a soldier's arm, penicillin. Within days, the fever breaks. The wound begins to heal. The soldier opens his eyes, dazed but alive. For centuries, such recovery would have been called a miracle. Now, it was medicine. The war, though terrible, accelerated medical progress in ways peace never could. Necessity forced innovation. Surgeons learned to operate faster, cleaner, and under conditions once thought impossible. Blood transfusion became routine. Mobile hospitals appeared near the front lines. X-rays, once experimental curiosities, became vital tools. But it was not only in war that medicine evolved. It was in the quiet persistence of scientists, the steady hands of nurses, and the faith of patients who dared to hope. In the early decades of the century, another battle raged silently across cities and villages alike against polio. It was a disease that struck without warning, leaving children paralyzed, their small limbs twisted and lifeless. Parents whispered its name with fear. Pools were closed, playgrounds emptied. In laboratories across the world, scientists fought back. Among them was Jonas Salk, a quiet, determined man who believed that humanity could end the terror. After years of meticulous research, he developed a vaccine that worked. In 1955, when the announcement came that the polio vaccine was safe and effective, church bells rang across America. Mothers wept. Children lined up at schools, sleeves rolled up, ready to be part of a new kind of miracle, one that came from science, not superstition. When Salk was asked who owned the patent to his vaccine, he simply replied, "There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" His words became a testament to the heart of healing, not profit, but protection. As medicine advanced, the human body itself became a frontier to explore. Machines that could see beneath the skin appeared: CT scans, MRI, ultrasound. Surgeons learned to repair hearts, replace organs, and even reconnect severed limbs. What had once been impossible became routine, almost ordinary. But the wonder never truly faded. Picture a cardiac surgeon standing beneath the cold lights of an operating theater in 1967. The air hums with the rhythm of machines. His hands are steady, his mind focused. Before him lies a patient whose heart has been replaced by another, a gift from someone whose life has ended, but whose heartbeat continues in another chest. The first successful human heart transplant. The surgeon steps back, exhausted but alive with awe. The patient's pulse returns. A life continues through another. Humanity had crossed into a realm that once belonged only to gods and myths. But medicine, for all its triumphs, never escaped its moral burden. Every discovery carried questions. How far should we go to preserve life? What does it mean to heal? Where does compassion end and control begin? In the laboratories where DNA was first unraveled, scientists stared at the very code of existence. The double helix, delicate and elegant, contained the blueprint of all living things. To read it was to read creation itself, but to edit it, to change it, raised questions as old as time. Still, curiosity persisted, for it is human nature to reach beyond what is known. In the late 20th century, as computers hummed and satellites circled the Earth, medicine entered the digital age. Records became electronic, surgeries became robotic, and diagnostics became guided by algorithms. The healer now had new tools, machines, that could listen to the body's secrets better than the human ear ever could. And yet, even with all the advancement, the essence of care remained unchanged. In every hospital room, the ancient gesture continued, a hand reaching out to comfort, a quiet word spoken in the dark, a promise that you are not alone. Consider the nurse in an intensive care unit at midnight. The lights are dim, machines beep softly, tracing the fragile rhythm of a patient's heart. She checks the monitor, adjusts the IV, and gently brushes a strand of hair from the patient's face. Outside, the world sleeps, but here, the work of mercy continues. She is no different in spirit from the midwife who once crushed herbs by a fire, or the monk who prayed beside a sickbed 1,000 years ago. Medicine had traveled through ages of ignorance, pain, and faith, but its soul had remained the same, an unbroken devotion to life. The 20th century also forced humanity to face diseases of its own making. Pollution, addiction, and stress began to replace plagues and fevers. The body was no longer only a battlefield of germs. It had become the mirror of a world that healed itself too slowly. And still, the doctors, nurses, and scientists persisted. In the 1980s, when a new and terrifying illness, HIV/AIDS, emerged, fear returned. People whispered again, just as they had in medieval times, searching for meaning, for hope. It took decades, but once again, science answered with compassion and perseverance. Treatments turned death sentences into chronic conditions. Knowledge, shared freely, became the vaccine against despair. Every era of medicine has its own language of courage. The tools may change, but the spirit does not. As the century drew to its close, humanity stood at the threshold of genetic medicine, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. The healers of the New World were not only doctors, but also programmers, engineers, and thinkers who built bridges between biology and code. The scalpel met the microchip. The microscope met the machine. But the story, as it always has been, was not about tools. It was about the eternal bond between the healer and the healed, the quiet exchange of trust that transcends centuries. Imagine now a doctor walking down a hospital corridor in the late 1990s. The walls are lined with monitors and blinking lights. The hum of machines fills the air. He stops by a room where a child sleeps after surgery. For a moment, all the technology fades into the background. He listens to the soft, even breathing and smiles. That sound, the rhythm of survival, is older than any invention. From fire to fluorescence, from herbs to heart transplants, from whispered prayers to digital scans, medicine has never truly been about defeating death. It has always been about honoring life, its fragility, its resilience, its endless mystery. And as the 20th century faded into the 21st, humanity carried forward the same ancient promise: to care, to comfort, to continue. Somewhere, in a quiet corner of a modern hospital, the past still lingers. The gentle scent of antiseptic replaces that of sage and rosemary, but the spirit is the same. A healer leans close, whispers words of reassurance, and in that moment, time collapses. The monk, the midwife, the soldier's doctor, the scientist, they are all there, watching, guiding, remembering. Because healing is not only about medicine, it is about memory. It is about connection. It is about love that refuses to vanish even in the face of death. And so the story of primitive medicine does not end. It simply becomes the story of us. The 21st century arrived not with a whisper, but with a hum, a chorus of machines, satellites, and circuits singing the anthem of progress. In hospitals, computers glowed where candles once flickered. In laboratories, robots replaced hands, algorithms replaced guesswork, and yet, at the heart of it all, one truth remained untouched: the desire to heal, to preserve the fragile miracle of life. The primitive healer's fire had become the pulse of a global network. Medicine, once confined to the boundaries of flesh and bone, now stretched across the invisible web of data and intelligence. The stethoscope had become digital, the microscope had become molecular, and the healer had become something new, not only a caretaker of bodies, but a navigator of information. In the sterile light of a modern hospital, a surgeon stands before a console. His hands do not touch the patient directly. Instead, they move robotic arms through screens and sensors. A heart valve is replaced, a tumor removed, all with movements smaller than a whisper. The machine hums softly, precise as thought itself. When the operation ends, the surgeon removes his gloves and smiles faintly. The patient, thousands of miles away, will wake with only a few small scars, testament to the union of human intuition and artificial intelligence. This is the new landscape of healing. But beneath the perfection of technology lies the same fragile rhythm that began in caves and forests. A pulse, a breath, a will to live. In the 21st century, medicine has crossed boundaries once thought sacred. Gene therapy rewrites the script of life itself, correcting errors written into DNA by chance or time. In laboratories where light refracts through glass like a prism, scientists watch cells heal from within, guided by the code of their own biology. Diseases that once condemned generations, cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, some forms of blindness, begin to fade into history. Imagine a young girl born with a genetic condition that once guaranteed a short life. She lies in a hospital bed, a tiny IV line running to her arm. Inside the clear fluid that enters her veins are millions of microscopic messengers, viruses reprogrammed to deliver health instead of harm. Within weeks, her muscles strengthen. Her breath deepens. She stands, walks, runs. Her laughter fills the corridor. The primitive healer's chant has become a molecule of mercy. Elsewhere, in the vast silence of space, medicine has found new frontiers. Astronauts floating in orbit test the limits of the human body beyond gravity. Their bones thin, their muscles weaken, their hearts adapt to weightlessness. Doctors on Earth monitor their vital signs from thousands of kilometers away. Every heartbeat, every breath is translated into data, analyzed, stored, and studied. It is strange to think that healing, once performed beside a fire of stones, is now practiced among the stars. Back on Earth, the very idea of what it means to be alive begins to blur. Artificial organs pump blood, neural implants restore sight and sound, robotic limbs respond to thought. The boundaries between biology and technology dissolve into a single continuum of being. Picture a man who lost his arm in an accident. Years later, he sits in a clinic, his new prosthetic connected to his nerves. The doctor asks him to move his fingers. He thinks, and the hand obeys. The fingertips can feel temperature, texture, even pressure. The man closes his eyes, tears forming as he touches his daughter's face for the first time in years. In that moment, the healer's journey, spanning millennia, comes full circle. The body, once a mystery, is now a canvas for compassion and invention. But even as humanity conquers the material limits of medicine, a new challenge arises: the mind. Mental health, long shrouded in stigma and silence, steps into the light. Depression, anxiety, trauma. These invisible wounds prove that healing is not only of the flesh, but of the soul. Neuroscience and psychology join hands, mapping the architecture of emotion, memory, and identity. Therapists become guides through inner labyrinths, while medications and mindfulness together weave new forms of care. The healer of the 21st century is not only a scientist, but a listener. Imagine a quiet therapy room, sunlight filtering through pale curtains. A patient sits across from a therapist, hands clasped, voice trembling. There are no machines here, no screens, only words, silence, and empathy. The therapist nods gently. The patient breathes, speaks, begins to heal. In a world filled with algorithms, sometimes the simplest human connection remains the most powerful medicine of all. And yet, the reach of technology extends even here. Artificial intelligence begins to predict depressive episodes before they happen, analyzing speech, heart rate, and sleep patterns. Virtual therapists offer comfort through screens. For some, it is salvation. For others, it is a haunting reminder that compassion, too, can be digitized. The debate deepens. Can empathy be programmed? As AI learns to read scans, detect tumors, and suggest treatments with superhuman accuracy, many fear that the doctor's role may fade. But those who understand healing know otherwise. The machine may know the disease, but only the human can know the patient. Only a person can sit beside a dying soul, hold a trembling hand, and whisper, "You are not alone." The machine can calculate the odds of survival. Only the human can remind us why survival matters. The 21st century's miracles are breathtaking. Nanobots swim through veins to deliver targeted medicine. 3D printers craft new organs from living cells. Stem cells repair spinal injuries once deemed hopeless. And yet the old healer's instinct, the will to protect life, still guides every innovation. Consider a neonatal unit in a modern city. Tiny incubators glow softly in the dark. Inside, premature infants rest beneath the watchful eyes of nurses and machines. Each heartbeat is amplified on a monitor. Each breath measured, supported, cherished. A single drop of milk, a gentle touch, can mean the difference between life and loss. The technology here is extraordinary, but what truly sustains these children is tenderness. Tenderness, the oldest medicine of all. In another corner of the world, telemedicine brings healing to those who once had none. A woman in a remote village holds a smartphone. On the screen, a doctor thousands of miles away examines her child's rash, prescribes medicine, and reassures her. In the hum of that digital connection, the ancient healer's spirit travels once more. Through circuits instead of paths, through light instead of footsteps. The healer no longer needs to be near. Compassion has found a way to cross time and distance. Still, amid all the progress, questions linger like echoes. How much of life should we control? When does healing become altering? As humans begin to edit genes, design embryos, and extend lifespans, medicine stands again at the edge of philosophy. To heal without humility is to risk forgetting why healing matters. Imagine a future not far from now. A man, old and frail, sits in a clinic surrounded by holographic screens. The doctor offers him a pill that could extend his life by decades. The man looks at his hands, the wrinkles, the veins, the memories etched in skin. He smiles softly and says, "I have lived enough." The doctor nods, understanding. Healing is not always about adding time. It is about honoring the life already lived. The healer of tomorrow must remember the lessons of the past. In the vast data centers where medical AI learns and evolves, billions of patient histories flow like rivers of memory. Every heartbeat recorded, every disease mapped, every cure refined. Somewhere within that ocean of information lies the echo of a single healer grinding herbs by a fire. Humanity has built an empire of knowledge, but the soul of medicine still rests in the same place: compassion. The primitive medicine that once saved lives with leaves and chants now saves lives with lasers and code. The tools have changed beyond recognition, but the essence is eternal. Every scan, every surgery, every diagnosis is still an act of faith. In life, in hope in each other. Perhaps one day, centuries from now, when humanity travels among the stars, there will be doctors tending to patients on distant worlds. They will use tools we cannot yet imagine. But somewhere, in the quiet after a long operation, one of them will look out a window at the infinite night and remember that it all began here, on Earth, in the dust and the pain and the wonder of being alive. They will remember that the first healer had no microscope, no machine, no name, only love and the will to try. And maybe that is what truly defines medicine, not the success, not the science, but the trying to save, the trying to understand, the trying to care. Because as long as there is life, there will be suffering. And as long as there is suffering, there will be someone who cannot bear to stand by and watch. Someone who will reach out, whether with fire or light, with herbs or algorithms, and say, "Let me help." That is the oldest sentence in human history, and perhaps the most beautiful. The 22nd century begins not with the clamor of discovery, but with the quiet hum of anticipation. Cities gleam under domes of purified air. Vast medical centers stretch like glass citadels across the landscape, humming with light and energy. The human body, once a mystery to be coaxed with herbs or prayers, is now mapped in astonishing detail. Every cell, every neuron, every strand of DNA can be seen, understood, and even guided toward health. The primitive healer's fire has become a lattice of lasers, nanobots, and artificial intelligence. In a laboratory beneath the city's gleaming towers, nanobots the size of molecules swim in a solution, programmed to seek out damaged tissue and repair it with precision unimaginable to even the surgeons of the 20th century. They repair neurons, rebuild arteries, and cleanse infections at a microscopic scale, moving faster than the eye can follow, guided by the algorithms of the most advanced medical AI ever created. Imagine a man who has suffered a heart attack. In the 20th century, he would have been rushed to a hospital, undergo open-heart surgery, and face weeks of recovery. In this century, he lies on a table no larger than a bed as billions of nanobots enter his bloodstream. They find clots, dissolve them, mend tissue, and even stimulate regeneration of cardiac muscle. Within hours, his heart functions as if nothing had gone wrong. The AI guiding this operation does not merely follow commands. It predicts complications before they arise, adjusting its actions in real time. It integrates centuries of medical knowledge with live monitoring of cellular behavior, environmental factors, and even genetic predispositions. It has learned through vast simulations how diseases evolve, mutate, and respond to treatment. And yet, the human doctor still remains. The surgeon's role has not disappeared, it has transformed. He or she is no longer a craftsman laboring with hands alone, but a conductor orchestrating a symphony of biological processes, machines, and predictive models. They guide, intervene when intuition is necessary, and provide the reassurance no algorithm can deliver, the knowledge that someone cares. Across the globe, AI systems continuously monitor populations, predicting outbreaks before they occur. Genetic editing, combined with predictive medicine, allows the prevention of diseases even before a patient is born. Conditions such as congenital heart defects, certain cancers, and inherited metabolic disorders can now be anticipated and corrected in utero. Imagine a mother holding her newborn, watching as a tiny implant within the child's bloodstream continuously monitors genetic markers. Any irregularity is detected immediately, nanobots are dispatched, and a problem that would have once doomed the child is prevented entirely. The infant grows without fear of the hereditary illness that haunted their ancestors. Yet, even in this age of predictive medicine, not all is mechanical. Emotional health, once neglected, is treated with the same seriousness as the body. Neural implants subtly modulate neurotransmitters to alleviate depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress, while virtual therapy programs adapt in real time to the patient's responses. Humans interact with these systems, ensuring that even as AI guides treatment, empathy and understanding remain central. The line between therapy and technology blurs. Imagine a young adult recovering from trauma. They wear a lightweight neural interface that monitors brainwave patterns, providing calming signals when panic threatens. Simultaneously, a virtual therapist engages them in dialogue, adapting its tone, pace, and questions based on subtle emotional cues. For the patient, it feels both deeply personal and profoundly futuristic. The mind, once unreachable, is now a landscape to be navigated with both science and care. In the hospitals of this era, walls are no longer barriers. They are canvases of real-time data. Holographic projections display organs, blood flow, and cellular activity in 3 dimensions. Doctors, nurses, and AI systems collaborate seamlessly in an environment that seems more like a command center than a traditional ward. Yet in every interaction, the fundamental human principle of care persists. The hand on a shoulder, the voice that soothes, the quiet presence that reassures. Medicine has expanded beyond the individual. Global health is managed by interconnected AI networks that analyze genetic, environmental, and epidemiological data to prevent epidemics before they occur. Outbreaks are predicted days, sometimes weeks, before they begin, allowing preemptive interventions that stop disease in its tracks. Vaccines are no longer reactive. They are proactive, designed for the unique genetic makeup of populations and individuals alike. Consider a future influenza virus. In the 20th century, it would sweep across continents, claiming thousands, sometimes millions. In this era, AI predicts mutations, develops vaccines before the first case appears, and delivers them through drones, 3D printed syringes, or nanobot inoculations. The pandemic never materializes. Humanity continues uninterrupted, oblivious to what might have been. Yet, as medicine becomes predictive and preventative, ethical questions emerge. How much control over our bodies is too much? Should genes be edited before birth? Should longevity be extended beyond natural limits? These questions echo the dilemmas faced by every healer across history, from the monk who prayed over a fevered patient to the scientist who created penicillin. The tools have changed, but the moral complexity remains. In this era, the healer becomes a philosopher as well as a practitioner. They guide not only treatment, but decision-making, ensuring that the march of technology does not outpace wisdom. Decisions about life and death, enhancement and intervention are debated with care, humility, and awareness of historical lessons. Space medicine has also become a critical frontier. Humans colonize Mars, explore orbital habitats, and undertake missions beyond the solar system. The human body, evolved for Earth, faces challenges of gravity, radiation, and isolation. Healing in space requires both ingenuity and technology. Bioengineered organs, radiation shielding implants, and AI-assisted monitoring ensure survival far from home. Imagine an astronaut on Mars, experiencing muscle atrophy and bone density loss. Nanobots circulate in their bloodstream, repairing tissue. Neural interfaces adapt to cognitive changes caused by isolation. Holographic doctors on Earth guide every step, responding in real time to every physiological change. Life beyond Earth has become possible because medicine has learned not only to react, but to anticipate, to integrate, and to adapt. Even in the face of extraordinary technological power, the lessons of primitive medicine remain present. Healing is still about observation, compassion, and connection. The nurse comforting a patient on a distant colony, the scientist adjusting a nanobot swarm, the AI predicting an outbreak. They are all threads in the same continuum that began with a person grinding herbs, observing symptoms, and refusing to let suffering be final. The near future is a world where disease is no longer merely treated, it is anticipated and prevented. Human life is prolonged, enhanced, and enriched. Yet the core truth persists. Medicine, no matter how advanced, exists to serve life, to ease suffering, and to preserve the fragile miracle of existence. And in this century, as the hum of machines fills hospitals, homes, and colonies, the healer's heart beats on, unchanged, unbroken, eternal. The story of primitive medicine has become a story of foresight, of precision, and of love amplified by technology. It is the story of humanity learning not just to survive, but to flourish. As the 22nd century unfolds, humanity stands at a threshold unlike any other in history. Medicine no longer simply repairs or preserves life, it enhances it. Bodies that once succumbed to injury, disease, or the natural wear of time are now augmented, redesigned, and optimized. The human being, long bound by biology, begins to transcend it. Consider a young woman, born with a congenital heart defect. In the past, her life would have been measured by the limitations of her body. Now she walks with enhanced cardiovascular function, powered by a blend of artificial organs, genetic therapy, and nanobot-assisted repair. Her body adapts in real time to exercise, stress, and environment. She is stronger, more resilient than any ancestor could have imagined. Yet she carries within her the same fragile consciousness, the same need for care and understanding that defined the first healer's patient centuries ago. Enhancement extends beyond survival. Neural implants allow instantaneous access to information, precise control over prosthetic limbs, and the restoration of lost senses. A deaf child can hear music as vividly as any composer intended. A blind adult perceives colors, shapes, and motion through synthetic retinas that translate light into neural impulses. Human limitation, once absolute, becomes negotiable. Yet with power comes profound responsibility. Humanity faces ethical dilemmas that challenge the very definition of life. Genetic editing allows the correction of inherited diseases, but also opens the door to elective modifications. Height, intelligence, resistance to disease, choices that once belonged to fate or chance are now ours to make. Who decides what is acceptable? Who draws the line between healing and enhancement? Imagine a society where parents can select their child's genetic traits. Some choose traits to prevent disease, others to increase intellectual potential, athletic ability, or longevity. The questions multiply. Will this create a new hierarchy of human capability? Will compassion survive when physical perfection is engineered? The ancient lessons of medicine remind us that science alone is never enough. Wisdom and empathy must guide every decision. Human augmentation also extends into the mechanical realm. Limbs replaced with robotics move faster, stronger, and with greater precision than natural anatomy ever allowed. Exoskeletons allow elderly individuals to walk unaided, soldiers to carry immense loads, and workers to perform tasks that once required extraordinary strength. Neural interfaces connect the mind to machines, enabling communication with prosthetics, vehicles, and even AI assistants at thought speed. The boundary between body and tool blurs, raising new philosophical and practical questions. Where does the human end and the machine begin? In one laboratory, a man prepares for the integration of a neural augmentation device. Electrodes align with precise regions of the brain, connecting him to a digital network that monitors both his physiological state and cognitive activity. The device will enhance memory, accelerate learning, and provide real-time access to global knowledge. Yet he hesitates before the procedure, aware that while his body may improve, his consciousness, his identity, will face unprecedented transformation. The healer's role in this era becomes as much about counsel as about intervention. Doctors guide patients not just through surgery or therapy, but through choices about their future selves. They help navigate the moral landscape of enhancement, weighing the desire for perfection against the need for balance and humanity. The ancient responsibility, protecting life, remains, but its dimensions have grown exponentially. In parallel, longevity treatments begin to challenge the natural course of life itself. Telomere therapies, cellular rejuvenation, and regenerative medicine allow humans to live far beyond traditional lifespans. Some individuals experience life centuries long, witnessing the rise and fall of cultures, technologies, and entire ways of living. But with prolonged life comes new burdens. Memory, identity, and social connection must be preserved as bodies endure far longer than before. In a quiet chamber, an elderly researcher undergoes a rejuvenation procedure, watching holographic images of his youth flicker alongside his present self. The procedure restores tissue, rewinds biological age, and revives vitality. He can once again run, swim, and climb as he did decades prior. Yet when he meets younger colleagues, he wonders, how will society integrate centuries-long lifespans? How will the meaning of life, love, and work evolve when time is no longer limited? Alongside these advancements, AI plays a critical role in ethical oversight. Neural networks analyze potential consequences of gene editing, life extension, and augmentation at a scale no human could comprehend alone. They model social, environmental, and psychological outcomes, guiding humanity away from catastrophic missteps. Yet the AI itself is not the final authority. Humans must retain moral agency, balancing intelligence with empathy, knowledge with conscience. Space colonization magnifies these challenges. On Mars, humans confront extreme environments that demand augmentation to survive. Radiation-resistant tissues, enhanced lung capacity, and neural interfaces that adapt to low gravity become necessities. Colonists face both physical and psychological isolation, and medical AI provides constant monitoring. Remote doctors advise in real time, while nanobots perform delicate surgeries without human presence. Life is preserved, yet the human spirit must also be nurtured, reminding us that healing is never merely mechanical. Even in this augmented future, disease still exists, but it is met with unprecedented precision. Viruses are neutralized at the molecular level before symptoms arise. Cancer cells are identified and destroyed individually by nanobot swarms. Autoimmune disorders are modulated through advanced neural interfaces that adjust immune responses dynamically. Medicine has become anticipatory rather than reactive. It is proactive, continuous, and deeply personal. And yet, despite extraordinary technological power, the same principles that guided primitive healers endure. Observation, care, patience, and empathy remain central. The difference is scale. The ancient healer observed symptoms with eyes and hands. Now, AI observes billions of data points in real time, identifying patterns invisible to human perception. The goal is the same: to preserve life, alleviate suffering, and honor the fragile miracle of existence. Ethical dilemmas continue to multiply. Who has access to these enhancements? Will they become tools of equity or instruments of division? How do we maintain humanity when mortality, limitation, and suffering, the very experiences that shaped empathy, are increasingly optional? These are questions that no technology alone can answer. Human wisdom must evolve alongside capability. Consider a world where augmentation is ubiquitous. Children are born with enhanced cognition. Adults live centuries, and robotic limbs are indistinguishable from organic ones. Who are we? Are we still human, or have we become something entirely new? The answer, centuries in the making, may depend on whether we remember the lessons of those first healers. That medicine is never just about the body. It is about connection, compassion, and the responsibility to care for another being. In private homes, in hospitals, and in distant colonies, humans continue to comfort, teach, and guide one another. They sit beside the sick, hold hands, whisper encouragements, and nurture trust. Machines and AI may assist, monitor, and even predict, but empathy is uniquely human. And it is this empathy that defines the true scope of healing. The story of medicine, from primitive herbs to gene editing and neural augmentation, is a continuous thread. It is a testament to curiosity, courage, and the relentless human desire to preserve life. It is the story of learning, failing, experimenting, and always reaching farther than before. Humanity has learned to manipulate biology, to enhance life, to traverse the limitations of the body and mind. Yet it has also learned that true healing is not only about extending existence, but enriching it, preserving identity, and maintaining connection across time, space, and generations. And so, even in a world of augmented humans, AI-guided medicine, and life extended beyond natural bounds, the first lesson remains. The healer is defined not by tools or knowledge, but by the choice to act, to comfort, and to care. The hands that once crushed herbs, the lips that once whispered prayers, the minds that once studied fever and pain, they are still present in every act of medicine, now amplified across centuries and technologies. Healing has become more than survival. It has become a promise that life, in any form, under any circumstance, is worthy of preservation, respect, and love. And as humans stand on the edge of what was once impossible, the primitive lesson echoes still. To heal is to honor life. To care is to remember our shared humanity, and to persist is the most profound act of all. Humanity has always been bound by the surface of the earth, tethered to gravity, climate, and the fragility of ecosystems. Yet now, centuries of observation, experimentation, and technological innovation have allowed humans to venture beyond the cradle of their origins. Space, once a void of fear and mystery, has become a frontier for life and for medicine. In orbiting stations above the Earth, astronauts live in enclosed habitats cut off from the natural rhythms of sun and soil. Every heartbeat, every breath, every drop of water is monitored. Life support systems regulate temperature, humidity, and oxygen levels. In these artificial environments, human biology is challenged as never before. Muscles atrophy without resistance, bones weaken without gravity, and the immune system adapts unpredictably to the sterile, recycled air. Here, medicine is not reactive, it is anticipatory. Nanobots travel through veins, repairing microfractures in bone and muscle as they occur. Neural implants compensate for sensory deprivation, maintaining cognitive function despite prolonged isolation. Blood tests, once performed daily, are now conducted continuously through embedded microfluidic sensors that analyze every parameter of health. AI monitors patterns that no human eye could detect, predicting illness before symptoms manifest. Imagine an astronaut floating silently in the cabin of a Mars-bound spacecraft. The planet below is red and distant, a desert stretched across millions of kilometers. His body, weakened by low gravity, is guided by robotic exoskeletons that provide resistance for exercise. Tiny nanobots circulate within his bloodstream, repairing tissue damaged by radiation exposure. A neural interface feeds him real-time data. His bone density, heart rate, and cellular integrity are all optimized. Yet, despite all this technology, he experiences the same primal fears as his ancestors: vulnerability, isolation, and the frailty of life. Medicine in space is not merely mechanical. It is profoundly human, designed to support not only survival, but the mental and emotional resilience of the individual. On distant colonies, doctors rely on both AI and human judgment. Telemedicine links Earth-based specialists with patients millions of kilometers away. A surgical procedure may be guided remotely by holographic projection, while nanobots perform the operation under AI supervision. Every decision balances precision and compassion, efficiency and ethics. Life in space has demanded a new kind of healer, one who integrates technology, intuition, and empathy seamlessly. Back on Earth, global health systems have evolved in response to both planetary and extraterrestrial challenges. Predictive algorithms analyze genetic, environmental, and behavioral data from billions of individuals, identifying vulnerabilities and preventing outbreaks before they spread. Vaccines are tailored not only to human populations, but also to conditions in space habitats, ensuring that interplanetary communities remain protected from Earth-borne pathogens. Consider a pandemic scenario in the 22nd century. A novel virus emerges not in one city, but simultaneously across multiple continents and orbital colonies. AI systems detect anomalies in real time, predicting transmission patterns with unprecedented accuracy. Drone networks deliver targeted vaccines and nanobot therapies, while holographic consultations guide patients through isolation and treatment. Within weeks, the virus is contained, not through fear or lockdowns, but through anticipation, coordination, and precise intervention. Humanity has learned to prevent disasters before they occur. Yet, even in a world of global surveillance and predictive medicine, challenges persist. Ethical dilemmas multiply when populations are heterogeneous, spread across planets, and connected through vast data networks. Decisions about resource allocation, treatment prioritization, and genetic modification must be made in a context that spans both Earth and space. Humanity must reconcile the power of technology with the enduring principles of fairness, empathy, and respect for life. In remote Martian settlements, a doctor confronts these dilemmas daily. Supplies are limited, patients are isolated, and the margin for error is small. Every choice carries weight. Which surgery to perform, which procedure to delay, which genetic therapy to administer. AI provides guidance, but the final decision rests with human judgment. This is the convergence of medicine, ethics, and responsibility, echoing the dilemmas faced by the first healers who decided when and how to intervene in life centuries ago. The human body itself continues to adapt. Radiation-resistant tissues, augmented cardiovascular systems, and neural interfaces that compensate for sensory loss allow life to flourish where it would otherwise be impossible. Medicine has extended beyond Earth, transforming the constraints of gravity, atmosphere, and isolation into manageable variables. Yet every advancement is anchored in centuries of knowledge, from the first herbalists to Renaissance anatomists, from the developers of vaccines to the engineers of nanobots. Mental health is recognized as equally critical. Isolation, monotony, and the psychological stress of extraterrestrial life require novel approaches. Virtual reality environments simulate natural Earth landscapes, neural interfaces provide mood stabilization, and AI therapists monitor behavioral patterns, intervening when necessary. Emotional and cognitive resilience is as carefully engineered as physical health. The interplanetary perspective also forces humanity to reevaluate its definition of community. Populations are no longer limited to geographical proximity. They exist across planets and orbiting stations. Data networks replace highways, communication satellites replace oceans, and telemedicine bridges the distances once considered insurmountable. Yet human connection, the same force that drove primitive medicine, remains central. A comforting touch, a shared story, a supportive voice, these gestures traverse space, reminding humans that empathy is universal, transcending atmosphere and gravity alike. Imagine a Martian child receiving a vaccination while a parent watches from a distant Earth colony via holographic projection. Nanobots administer the therapy with precision, AI monitors the immune response, and virtual counselors provide reassurance. The child experiences both technological intervention and emotional support, seamlessly integrated. Across centuries, the fundamental principles of healing, observation, intervention, and care remain intact, though the tools and scale have transformed. Space medicine has also accelerated research in Earth-based healthcare. Techniques developed for low-gravity bone regeneration, radiation protection, and remote monitoring are applied to aging populations, isolated communities, and disaster zones. Innovations once intended for the stars now improve life on the ground, illustrating the profound interconnectedness of medical progress. At the same time, the ethical challenges are unprecedented. Genetic engineering in space may prevent disease, but could also create disparities between Earth-born and space-born humans. Decisions about enhancement, intervention, and longevity must consider not only individual benefit, but societal consequences. Humanity faces dilemmas of equity, identity, and moral responsibility on a scale never before encountered. Despite the technological marvels, the essence of medicine endures. Healing is still a relationship, a trust, a commitment to another being. AI, nanobots, and telemedicine extend the reach of care, but they do not replace the fundamental human principles that have guided healers for millennia: compassion, attention, and the refusal to abandon those in need. The story of primitive medicine, from herbs and chants to vaccines, antibiotics, and nanobot therapy, continues to evolve. Now it spans planets, orbiting habitats, and interstellar communication networks. Yet the same questions echo through time. How do we preserve life? How do we alleviate suffering? How do we balance power with empathy? Even as humans settle on Mars and prepare for journeys beyond the solar system, these questions remain central. Medicine is no longer just a tool for survival. It is a framework for ethical living, a philosophy of care, and a testament to the continuity of human compassion across space and time. The healer of the 22nd century is both an engineer and a philosopher, a scientist and a moral guide. They work with AI, robots, and genetic interventions, yet they never lose sight of the fundamental principle that has guided medicine for millennia. Life, in all its fragility and wonder, is precious, and the act of healing is an expression of love. And so, from caves lit by fire to orbiting stations circling distant planets, the continuum of medicine persists. Observation, intervention, compassion, the triad that sustained humanity in the past, now governs the health of populations across worlds. Technology has expanded the reach, precision, and effectiveness of medicine, but the heartbeat of healing remains profoundly human. Even in the silence of space, the whisper of the first healer can be heard. Let me help. Let me care. Let me preserve life. The story of medicine has transcended Earth, yet its soul remains unchanged. The 23rd century dawns with a quiet brilliance, an era in which medicine has transcended the bounds of human limitation entirely. The body, once a fragile vessel, is now a landscape of engineered resilience, augmented systems, and integrated consciousness. The mind, once bound by neurons alone, interfaces seamlessly with artificial intelligence, allowing thought, memory, and emotion to be enhanced, preserved, and shared across networks. The act of healing has become not just an intervention in the physical world, but a manipulation of the very fabric of life itself, its biology, its cognition, and its consciousness. The first lesson of medicine, from the earliest healers, remains unchanged: observe, intervene, and care. Yet now these acts span dimensions unimaginable to the physicians of the past. Nanobots circulate through the bloodstream of patients light years away, repairing cellular anomalies before they manifest as disease. Neural implants adjust synaptic activity in real time, correcting imbalances that would have caused emotional or cognitive dysfunction. Genetic sequences can be edited with precision so fine that a single base pair, the subtlest unit of life, can be corrected to prevent a hereditary disorder. Imagine a patient in an interstellar habitat orbiting a distant star. She awakens, her body monitored continuously by microbots that adjust hormone levels, repair minor tissue damage, and optimize metabolism. Her thoughts are partially processed through a cognitive augmentation interface that enhances memory, creativity, and analytical capacity. A holographic physician, thousands of kilometers away, observes her in real time, guiding any intervention that requires human judgment. Yet, the most profound aspect of her healing is not physical, it is relational. Despite the distance, despite the layers of technology, she experiences connection, empathy, and reassurance. Medicine in this era is deeply anticipatory. Predictive algorithms, trained on the accumulated history of billions of human lives, can foresee disease years or decades before it manifests. Yet these predictions are never deterministic. They are guidance, an offering of possibility rather than a decree of fate. Patients retain agency over their own biology, choosing interventions that align not only with their health, but with their values, their identities, and their aspirations. In parallel, consciousness itself has become a terrain for medical practice. Neural interfaces can detect the earliest signs of cognitive decline, anxiety, or depression, modulating brain activity subtly to maintain stability. Advanced psychotherapy is integrated with AI-assisted diagnostics, providing real-time emotional and cognitive support. Mental health, once marginalized, now occupies the same space as physical health, essential, respected, and rigorously attended. Consider a mind whose neural pathways have been augmented to prevent trauma-related dysfunction. When a memory of a catastrophic event arises, micro-interventions smooth the emotional response, preventing panic, depression, or PTSD. Yet the memory is not erased, it is integrated, understood, and transformed into insight. Healing here is holistic. It encompasses body, mind, and soul. Life extension has reached a point where mortality is optional rather than inevitable. Cells are rejuvenated continuously, tissues repaired before damage accumulates, and biological systems supported by synthetic scaffolding that maintains organ function indefinitely. Individuals may live for centuries, yet the extension of life is guided by ethics as much as science. Each extended life is accompanied by considerations of social integration, psychological well-being, and responsibility to the community. Ethical discourse has expanded to match these technological capacities. What does it mean to exist for centuries or even millennia? How should humans interact with sentient AI that participates in care? Can consciousness itself be transferred, duplicated, or shared without violating the essence of personhood? These are not abstract questions. They define the daily practice of healers across the stars. Space has become a laboratory of healing. Colonies on Mars, orbital habitats, and interstellar outposts require medical systems capable of operating across vast distances, variable gravity, and extreme environments. Disease is prevented, treated, and often reversed before symptoms appear. Yet the most challenging aspect is not technical, it is human. Isolation, separation from ancestral homelands, and the psychological burden of life in artificial habitats demand a level of care that integrates empathy, philosophy, and relational intelligence. In one habitat, a child plays beneath the glow of artificial sunlight. A microbot swarm monitors every heartbeat, every cellular signal, and every cognitive process, maintaining optimal health. Neural interfaces provide educational experiences beyond imagination, yet the child's emotional needs are attended by caregivers who may be physically distant but connected through holographic presence. The child learns resilience, trust, and empathy, the same values that guided primitive medicine, but within an environment of extraordinary technological power. Medicine has also become collaborative on an interstellar scale. Genetic therapies developed on Mars are tested in simulations on Earth, and viral defenses created in lunar labs are applied across habitats orbiting Jupiter. Knowledge flows freely, accelerated by AI that can analyze patterns, predict outcomes, and suggest interventions with unparalleled accuracy. Diseases are no longer contained by geography. They are managed through a network of intelligence spanning multiple worlds. Humanity has created a web of life preservation that extends beyond its home planet. Yet, even at this scale, the most essential principle of medicine remains human: compassion. Technology may anticipate disease, repair organs, and enhance cognition, but empathy cannot be encoded. The hand that comforts, the voice that reassures, the presence that listens, these remain central. Healers, now operating with AI, nanobots, and neural interfaces, are as much philosophers as technicians. Their decisions balance life, ethics, emotion, and consequence, reflecting millennia of accumulated wisdom. In this future, medicine is inseparable from morality. Decisions about who receives enhancements, how consciousness is augmented, and the balance between individual and collective well-being are made with deep reflection. Algorithms assist, but ethical judgment remains human. The first healers who chose when and how to intervene, who balanced risk and compassion, are echoed in every decision across these star-spanning networks. Healing has also become a matter of memory and legacy. Advanced neural networks preserve consciousness patterns for future reflection, allowing individuals to transmit experience, wisdom, and emotional insight across generations. Children born centuries later can access the thoughts and guidance of ancestors who have passed, integrating millennia of lived experience into their own understanding. Medicine in this context is not only about extending life, but extending knowledge, empathy, and wisdom. Imagine an elder who has lived for 3 centuries. Sitting before a console connected to neural archives, they transmit their experience of trauma, love, failure, and triumph to a new generation of colonists on a distant exoplanet. The neural interfaces allow the young to feel, understand, and learn from history directly. In this way, healing transcends the body. It preserves culture, connection, and conscience. Artificial intelligence now serves as a partner in healing. It does not replace human judgment, but augments it, synthesizing global data, individual physiology, and ethical considerations to guide intervention. Microbots, nanobots, and advanced surgical systems execute these plans with precision beyond human capability. Patients receive care that is simultaneously personalized, anticipatory, and universal. Yet the true miracle lies not in technology, but in continuity. From the first midwives grinding herbs by a fire to heal children centuries ago, to surgeons performing remote operations across light years, to AI-guided nanobots circulating in a distant habitat, the essence of healing persists: the will to act, the desire to alleviate suffering, and the courage to care. Medicine has become immortal, not because individuals live forever, but because the principles, the compassion, and the knowledge of humanity endure across centuries, planets, and stars. Healing is now an interstellar ethic, a network of life, a promise extended to all conscious beings, present and future. Even in a galaxy of humans, AI, and engineered consciousness, the first lesson remains unchanged. Healing is not merely science, it is a moral act: observation, intervention, compassion. These 3 principles guide every decision, from the smallest cellular repair to the care of populations across planets. In the silence of an interstellar hospital, an AI-assisted surgeon completes a procedure on a patient orbiting a distant sun. The patient awakens, stable and reassured. Across the communication network, family members thousands of kilometers away observe and provide support. Nanobots circulate, neural interfaces monitor cognition, and predictive algorithms continue to safeguard life. Yet in this symphony of technology, the heart of healing is unmistakable: care, empathy, and connection. And as humanity continues to expand across the cosmos, the legacy of primitive medicine, the herbs, the prayers, the observation, and compassion remains alive. It has evolved, amplified, and interwoven with the fabric of technology, yet its essence is unchanged. Healing is not simply survival. It is empathy, continuity, and love extended across space, time, and consciousness. The story comes full circle. From the fire-lit caves of early humanity to interstellar habitats orbiting alien worlds, from grinding leaves to programming nanobots, from whispered prayers to AI-guided interventions, the continuum of medicine stretches unbroken. Every healer, every patient, every act of compassion forms an unbroken chain linking the past, present, and future. Perhaps this is the ultimate lesson of medicine, that the tools, the techniques, and the knowledge may change beyond recognition, but the heart of healing, the courage to act, the desire to alleviate suffering, the willingness to connect with another being, remains eternal. And in that truth lies the final, enduring miracle: that despite the immensity of the universe, despite the breadth of time and space, life remains precious, and humanity remains committed to its care. The story of primitive medicine ends not with a conclusion, but with an eternal promise. To heal is to honor life. To care is to preserve connection. To persist is to act in love. Across stars and centuries, that promise continues. From the flickering fires of our earliest ancestors to the glowing interstellar hospitals of the future, the story of medicine is the story of humanity itself. Through millennia, healers have observed, intervened, and cared, transforming knowledge into action, compassion into life-saving practice. From primitive herbs and whispered prayers to nanobots circulating through bloodstreams and AI predicting disease light years away, the tools have changed, but the heart of healing remains unchanged. It is empathy, courage, and the relentless will to preserve life that have guided humanity across generations, across planets, and across time. In every era, the healer's mission is clear: to ease suffering, to protect life, and to act with compassion. Even as technology amplifies our ability to heal, the human touch, the comforting word, the guiding hand, the attentive presence remains irreplaceable. Across space and centuries, these acts define what it means to care. Medicine has become more than survival. It is prevention, enhancement, and preservation of consciousness. It spans Earth and the stars, intertwining biology, mind, and morality. Life is no longer just prolonged. It is enriched, nurtured, and respected in all its complexity. And yet, the legacy of primitive medicine persists. Every act of healing, no matter how advanced, echoes the first gesture of care beside a sick child or a fevered parent. Observation, intervention, and compassion remain the pillars of medicine, timeless and universal. As we close this journey, let us remember, to heal is to honor life, to care is to preserve connection, and to act is to embody love. From caves to colonies, from herbs to nanobots, the story continues, not only in history, but in every heartbeat, every gesture, and every choice to protect and nurture life. We heal. We care, we endure, and through it all, we persist in love.